You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater, your Niagara source for all NCAA football news, weekly betting odds, game analysis, race for the college football playoffs, and reactions to the AP Top 25 rankings. Here are your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Trey Patterson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the last installment of today's Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater 2021 NCAA College Football Conference Preview Shows right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your August 27th, 2021 edition. Your source of North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates and giveaways by following the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as liking us on Instagram and Facebook. You can listen to us on many different platforms, including Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Deezer. Wherever you're getting your podcasts at, we are available for you guys in audio form. And now, obviously, in video form as well on YouTube.com. So, guys, make sure if you're liking the video version of the podcast, hit that subscribe button, smash that bell icon, and like us for all updates on new videos and content that gets released on the network if you are enjoying the YouTube content as well. And lastly, our beautiful user-friendly website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding the network, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors. Everything's on there for you guys. Please go and check that out. As always, I'm one of your hosts of the Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter right underneath there at Caputs13_AGM. And as always, I'm joined on the college football portion of the network. He is a producer for Fox Sports Knoxville's The Blitz, as well as the co-host and contributing writer covering the Tennessee Vols for Fox Sports Knoxville. He is the one and only Trey Patterson. You can follow him on Twitter at Trey Patterson. Trey, I know you're real excited for today. We finish off with the SEC conference. It's kind of a best for last scenario for you.
Oh, yeah, and I think for most people who watch college football, they understand the SEC is the premier conference when it comes to college athletics, not just football, probably athletics all across the board. So it's a good day. At the time of recording, we are less than 48 hours away from college football being back with the Week 0 games, and less than 7 days away from my Tennessee Vols taking the field at Neyland Stadium for their first game of the season. Yeah. So I couldn't be more pumped than I am right now.
Taking the field for their first loss, Trey. Come on.
Not against Bowling Green. That will come 3 weeks later against Florida.
So we'll be covering the SEC conference today. Obviously, Trey has the most knowledge about this conference than any other conference in college football, because the Tennessee Vols play in the SEC. And like you said, in general, it is the most popular conference in college football as well. So it's the one that makes the money. So the big bucks.
I've lived pretty much my whole life in the SEC footprint, so I know all about it.
Yeah,
I've grown up around it.
So Trey, let's begin here, and I know you're excited because you're blowing into your microphone, so you must be a little bit extra excited there. But let's take a look at the standings from last year, Trey. And the SEC West, obviously Alabama going 13-0 over there, and then Florida winning the SEC East. Just what were your thoughts on the conference as a whole last year, and just your general thoughts on the conference as a whole? Like, obviously the news of Oklahoma and Texas possibly coming over, and that might change the dynamic of the middle of the conference. But in general, I mean, you obviously always see Alabama at the top. LSU is always usually pretty competitive. Florida and Georgia are usually always really competitive, and then you have a couple of the bigger schools that are up and down. But just in general, thoughts on the conference last year and the standings.
Yeah, so last year, just like most of the other conferences, it was a weird year in that COVID happened, and the SEC, who normally plays a 12-game regular season schedule, only got to play 10 games. They played a 10-game conference-only schedule. And that's why if you look at the standings, it shows the conference and then the overall record. So Alabama went undefeated in conference. Next closest was A&M, whose only loss was to Alabama. And then if you go down to the East, you had Florida, who was just able to squeak out a SEC East title with that 8-2 conference mark, with the deciding game being their win over Georgia. And Florida probably would have had a legit chance at making the college football playoff if not for a very boneheaded miscue in their final game of the season against LSU. I think Florida was ranked number 5 at the time, and a win against LSU would have put them into that top 4 conversation for a playoff spot. But they had stopped LSU short of the first down marker, and then Quincy, I can't remember the guy's last name, but Quincy for Florida picked up the guy's cleat that had fallen off and chucked it 40 yards down the field, got a game misconduct for it, prolonged the drive for LSU. They ended up kicking a game-winning field goal on that same drive. So, I mean, Florida was a good team last year. I don't expect that to be the case this year. They lost a lot of talent off that team. Right now, it's looking like just the 2 front runners are Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, you talk about Florida. I mean, they lost Kyle Trask, they lost Kadarius Toney, and they obviously lost Kyle Pitts to the NFL this past year. So there goes a major portion of their offense. So that's what happens when you have these great teams and they all graduate, move on to the NFL, and then you have teams like Alabama that just continue to reproduce continual top talent, which helps when you're the top team and you can recruit at the highest level. But as far as A&M goes, Treigh, I mean, they won their last 8 games last year. They finished 9-1. Did you kind of see that coming from them, finishing second in the SEC West last year ahead of Auburn and LSU, obviously coming off of the national championship, and they lost a ton of guys due to that as well?
Well, I think a lot of people saw LSU at the beginning of the season as the favorite to come in second in that or in that division. But week 1, they had a game against Mississippi State and got obliterated by the Bulldogs of Mississippi State. They just came out unprepared for the brand new Mike Leach offense that he instituted with the air raid. So LSU definitely had not a Super Bowl hangover, but a national championship hangover. So I don't think many people saw them or expected them to go into that season finishing at 5-5. I did think Texas A&M was going to be good. I didn't think they were going to be that good. But with a coach like Jimbo Fisher, it's only a matter of time before they take that leap.
And as far as the SEC East goes, Treigh, I mean, the Vols there finished 5th in the conference last year. Vanderbilt didn't win a game. What are you thinking about some of these teams over in the East? Obviously, Florida and Georgia, you know what you're most likely going to get from them, even though Florida's going to probably take a step back this year. But, I mean, do you expect the eastern part of the conference to kind of, pick it up, or do you think that the West still reigns supreme?
Well, as long as the West has Nick Saban, they're always going to be the supreme division within the SEC. But I do think the East is starting to pick up steam on them. I think most people would agree that Georgia is the second best team in the SEC. So that kind of balances out the West and the East to a degree. Missouri is a team that a lot of people are high on this year. They're returning a quarterback from last year in Connor Bazelak. Kentucky, there's a lot of people really high on Kentucky. Some people think they might even have the potential to beat Georgia this year. Mark Stoops has been with that team for a long time now. And even though he doesn't necessarily have the overall record to prove it, he has built that program up from the ground, or built them from the ground up. And he's done a good job there. He's recruited well. He's recruiting well right now as we speak, and they got a transfer quarterback in. So a lot of people think Kentucky's going to have a real shot at the East this year. As for Tennessee, they started last year off 2-0 with wins over Missouri and South Carolina, and then the season just went to hell after that. They played Georgia. And believe it or not, Tennessee was leading at halftime against Georgia. The score, I think, was 21-17. And Tennessee had just made a goal line stand on fourth down from the 1-yard line. They'd stopped Georgia twice in a row to send it to halftime. And all the momentum was on Tennessee's side. And then it just flipped, and their season derailed after that. Didn't win another game until they played Vanderbilt the last week of the season. So they ended up firing their coach. Tennessee's bringing in a new coach this year. Don't know what really to expect out of him yet, but I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we get into predictions.
Yep, and Vanderbilt obviously atrocious year last year, 0-9. Yeah.
They ended up firing Derek Mason, and they hired Clark Lee, who I do think is going to be a good fit for that program, but they're not leaving that basement anytime soon.
Okay, so as far as the history of the conference goes, Treigh, got the SEC championship history up on the screen. What have you thought about this conference the last 10 years or so? Obviously, Alabama, the Nick Saban era for Alabama, they're usually in it more times than not and almost every single year. But what have been your thoughts on the SEC championship history as of late?
Well, I think there is a misconception that Alabama wins the conference every year, and that's not the case. I mean, they've won it more than anybody else since 2014, as you can see on this list. Or I mean, I guess you can go all the way back to 2009 when they really started their dominant stretch. Um, but you look there, LSU's won a national, or they won the SEC championship and the national championship in 2019. Georgia beat Auburn in the national championship game in 2017, so Alabama didn't even make the SEC championship that year. But 2017, Alabama ended up winning the national championship. So I think that's a trade-off that they're willing to make. I just think there's a little bit of a misconception that Alabama just wins the conference every year, and that's not always the case. If you look in just the past 4 years, they've only won it twice. And I'm saying only won it twice. Like, that's a bad thing. I'd kill for Tennessee to even make it to the championship game. But I don't know. What strikes me is that there's more parity in the SEC than a lot of people, come to expect.
I guess when you have, in Alabama and Georgia and even Auburn and LSU to a certain extent, those are four of the top programs in all of college football, not just the SEC. So it's a little bit more difficult when you have that many really competitive teams, that there are going to be years where some teams that probably would win, maybe the Pac-12 or be in the ACC championship game playing Clemson, won't even be showcased because they're going up against these other juggernaut teams within the SEC, and they really don't get that opportunity to showcase really how good their team is, and they might come out with an 8-4 record that looks pretty okay, but put them in a different conference, you might be looking at a 1 or 2 loss team.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think if you take Florida from last year and you put them in, I don't know, say the Big 12, they're probably an undefeated team, maybe one loss to like an Oklahoma, and I think that could be said for any of the top schools: A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. Hell, you put Missouri or even Kentucky in that conference, and they're probably going from a 4 or 5 win team to an 8 or 9 win team. That's just how tough the SEC can be. You don't get any breaks unless you're playing Vanderbilt. But even the other schools that used to be pushovers, like Mississippi State and Ole Miss and South Carolina, to an extent, those aren't even real pushover games anymore. You still got to go out there, field your team, and go at them for 60 minutes.
And we might as well talk about this before we hit the break on today's episode. The news with the SEC, Treigh, and obviously the rumored alliance with the other 3 conferences that obviously were pretty upset with the fact that Oklahoma and Texas would basically dissolve the Big 12 and go over to the SEC beginning in a few years here. Just what are your thoughts on that whole announcement? And do you think that, I believe we touched on this in the Big 12 preview that we started off the division previews with earlier this month, but just what are your thoughts on those 2 teams possibly coming over to the SEC? Do you like it from the SEC perspective, bringing in the 2 biggest teams from the Big 12? And what do you think of this possible alliance between the Pac, the ACC, and the Big 10? Do you think that would affect the SEC in any way?
So when we talked about the Big 12, I'm pretty sure I spoke about how much I didn't like the move from Tennessee's perspective. I didn't think it was good for Tennessee to bring in 2 traditional powerhouse schools into the conference. But the more like we've heard about it and what's going to happen, I do kind of think it's going to be good for everybody involved. We're looking, the SEC is looking at changing the way conference alignment works and going from 8 games to 9 games in conference. And this could benefit Tennessee in the fact that Tennessee might lose that traditional annual Alabama-Tennessee game every 3rd Saturday in October. And for the past 12 years, that's an automatic L on the schedule. You look at a team like Florida or Georgia, who are also in the SEC East. They only play Alabama right now once every 5 years, 6 years, once every 6 years or so. And then when LSU and Georgia play each other, Florida and Georgia play each other, they're playing at a neutral site. So Tennessee's really getting the butt end of this deal because they have to play Alabama every year, and then they have to travel to Florida and Georgia, whereas Georgia's not having to travel to Florida, and they only play Alabama once every few years. So I think it's good that it's going to cause a realignment. It's going to shift the power of the SEC and hopefully create more parity. As for the other conferences, like the Pac-12 and the Big Ten and the ACC, I think the agreement that they have, like, it's nothing more than just a word of mouth like agreement. I guess there's no contract involved. I think it's good for them. They need to do something for the sake of college football. The game's starting to evolve, and you don't want to get left behind.
And do you think that this would basically seal the deal for the Big 12, and it would basically be the Big Four conferences at this point if you were to lose Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC?
Well, see, I thought that again about 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, when we did the Big 12 episode. I thought that for sure, but now there's been a lot of talk about the Big 12 possibly reaching out and expanding. So they're losing Oklahoma and Texas. Now they're talking about possibly bringing in like an SMU and a Memphis into their conference. So instead of dissolving, as long as they can keep the rest of the member schools and their conference happy, I could see them reaching out and trying to expand back up to a 10-man or a 10-team conference, or even 12, get back up to the 12 number. So I was pretty certain they were going to dissolve 2 weeks ago. I'm not so certain anymore.
What do you think about the competitiveness of that conference if Texas and Oklahoma are gone, as far as on a national level? Obviously, they'll probably be competitive within the division, but on a national level, like we look at with the Pac-12, just most of the time the competition level just isn't up to snuff with some of the other divisions like the Big Ten, the SEC, and a couple of teams in the ACC.
Yeah, I think if they go out there and they recruit schools like Memphis or SMU or Houston or some of these other, bigger group of five schools, I think you might see a power shift from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, and that the Pac-12 will now take that jump over them, and the Big 12 will be known as the weakest conference in college football.
Well, we'll have to see how that goes. But we know the SEC is as strong as can be, and looks like it might be getting stronger with adding Oklahoma and Texas, at least to the competitiveness of the middle of the conference. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But stay right here, folks. We're going to take a commercial break and come back, and Trey's going to give his players to watch for the SEC this upcoming season, and he's going to go over the betting odds and pick who he likes for the SEC as far as the top 5 teams go. So stay right here. Be right back on Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater, and right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Experience a new way to play daily fantasy sports and esports on Thrive Fantasy. Thrive's game concept revolves around player props, which are simple over-unders on player stats. There are contests for traditional sports including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and cricket, as well as esports titles including CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, and more coming soon. Here's how to play. Choose your lineup of over-unders for top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Each prop has a fantasy point total based on how likely it is to hit. The more points the selection is worth, the riskier it is. Rack up the most points and win a share of the prize pool. Thrive is awarded over $2 million in cash, so come and prop up today.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to segment 2 of today's SEC conference preview right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network and on Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater. Brandon Caputo and Trey Patterson back with here. Guys, if you guys are enjoying the video version of the podcast, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, smashing that like, and hitting that bell icon for all updates on new content that gets released on the YouTube side of things. Really appreciate your support over there. And guys, if you missed any of our previous videos on our conference previews for the 2021 NFL season, but also the NCAA season, those are live on the channel right now on demand in either audio or video form. We went over the Big 12, the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten in recent episodes, and we're finishing off today with the SEC Conference. So, Trey, with that said, let's take a look at the betting odds for the SEC Conference this year. It's up on the screen for the video viewers here. Alabama leads the way to nobody's surprise there. at minus 165. Georgia in second at plus 200. You got A&M in third at plus 1,000. Florida at fourth at plus 1,400, and LSU at plus 1,600. And then coming up at the rear is obviously to nobody's surprise as well. You have Vanderbilt at plus 50,000. So Trey, I don't know if you're as big a betting man as I think you are, where you're going to be able to put something on Vandy at plus 50,000. But what are you thinking of the betting odds and how they shake out this year?
As far as Vanderbilt goes, I'm surprised they're not at plus 100,000. They have literally no shot at winning the SEC championship this year. You can make those odds as large as you wanted to entice somebody to bet on it. It's not happening. As far as the other bets or the other lines, I think Alabama at minus 165 is actually really good value. If I was setting the lines, I would probably have it at minus 220, 225, somewhere around there. So I think minus 165 is pretty good value. Georgia at plus 200. A same thing, pretty good value there too. I'd probably have them around plus 100 if I was making these odds. I think they're almost a lock to be the team to come out of the East. So if they're a lock to make it out of their side, anything can happen in one game. So plus 200, I really like those odds. And again, I know I said I like the first two, but I really, really like plus 1,000 for Texas A&M. That's probably my favorite line for the SEC championship odds so far. I think A&M is going to be really good this year. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people, and I think they have a real legit chance at winning the SEC and making the college football playoff.
Okay, so Trey likes A&M in third place right there at plus 1,000. Is there anybody in the bottom half there that you would even consider taking a flyer on, putting a little tiny bet on, or do you think that there really isn't anybody that has a shot in that bottom half?
If looking at the odds, if I was forced to, I'd probably say Kentucky. I think out of those bottom teams, I think Kentucky has the best shot at making some noise. They got a transfer quarterback in from Penn State. They've been building talent up around that team. The only question is going to be, can their defense, stop the other team from scoring points? I think their offense is going to be able to score. We got to see if their defense can hold up their end.
So they're currently 6 from the bottom at plus 5,000. Trey, I got to get your thoughts, though. Your Vols at plus 6,000. You said during the break they haven't made the SEC championship game since, you believe you said 2007. So do you think that is fair for them to be 5th from the bottom at this point?
I actually think it's pretty generous putting those at plus 6,000. What I try to tell people all the time is that there's a perception about Tennessee that there's just no talent there and they're just a really bad team. And I really don't think that's the case. I think there is talent there. It just hasn't been coached right. Ever since Butch Jones got fired in 2017 and the new regime took over and Jeremy Pruitt, he just did not know how to run a football team. He's a really good defensive coordinator, especially when he's got 5- and 4-star recruits surrounding him out there. But he just did not know what to do when he was on offense. You look at the Tennessee team from 2019, they had Marquez Callaway, Josh Palmer, Eric Gray, who's now at Oklahoma, and he's one of their preseason players to watch, newcomer guys, and Juwan Jennings.
Yep.
4 guys are going to be in the NFL, 3 of which are already in the NFL, and they had the worst offense. They had the 3rd worst offense in all of college football. So they have the talent, they just don't know how to be coached right. So if the new coach that Tennessee's got even knows remotely what he's doing, I think Tennessee could go out and play spoiler, win a few games they're not supposed to, but they're not competing for a title.
Okay, and do you think Vanderbilt wins a game within the conference this year? They'll probably win a game outside of the conference, maybe. But do you think that they go winless in the conference once again this year?
Hold on, I gotta pull up their schedule and see who their crossover is.
Because right now, this is all I can think about with Vanderbilt is.
Oh, I mean they're bad, man. They're really, really bad. I'm trying to think of anybody in the East. They might beat South Carolina, and I'm not even stretching that. A lot of people think South Carolina is going to be really bad this year. Other than the one 5-star running back they have, I don't expect them to be very good either. So. If I had to bet on it, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I think Clark Lee, the new head coach, gets it done, and it gets at least one win.
Okay, Vandy, they'll be They'll be partying the streets of Nashville if Vanderbilt can win a conference game this year within the
Yeah,
SEC.
they probably wouldn't be because they're not going to have any fans show up to the game anyways.
Ooh, throwing shade. You no longer live in Nashville, so I guess you can say that without being afraid of anything. And they don't have any fans to be afraid of, I guess, anyway. That's probably what you would say. So, with that said, let's take a look at the players to watch from the SEC. Treigh, got it up on the screen here for the YouTube viewers. And they've actually got quite a big amount of players that are ranked in the top 50 college football players to watch this year. They've actually got a fairly nice number there. Anybody that sticks out to you or that you want to mention to the listeners here to watch out for this year?
Oh, yeah, Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU. He's going to be a first-round corner, probably a top 10, top 15 pick, depending on how he plays this year. Could even work his way up into a top 5 spot. Same with Josh Jobe from Alabama. He's another guy that's really good. That's probably going to be a top 15 prospect or top 15 draft pick. Tank Bigsby, all-name guy right there. He's going to be a really good running back for Auburn. I don't think a lot of people are expecting much from Auburn this year, but he's going to be really good. Arik Gilbert, that's a guy that plays tight end, but kind of transitioned to receiver. He's actually on leave right now from Georgia, but if he gets in there and plays, watch out for him. He's only a sophomore, so he won't be draft eligible till after next year, but that's a guy who's got first-round potential. Kennard from Kentucky, a really good offensive lineman. He's probably going to be a first-round, maybe second-round offensive tackle pick. And then after that, another guy that I think might stand out would be Malachi Moore from Alabama, another corner. I don't think he's top 15 potential, but definitely still a first-rounder.
Yep, so he's currently ranked number 37 on the top players in college football coming into this year. What's interesting, Treigh, is the top 5 players for the SEC are all cornerbacks. So when was the last time you saw, we usually talk about some great receivers or quarterbacks from this division, but the fact that there's the top 5 players going into the season for this conference are all cornerbacks, and there's actually 7 in total, but the top 5 especially, just what does that say about what's going on right now?
Defense, man. You got to try to keep up with how fast the offenses have gotten, how good the offenses have been. So you got to have good corners. It's a passing game now. So if you don't have some shutdown corners, it's going to be hard to win football games. And what do the corners got to do? They got to lock down receivers. And by far, the best receiver in the SEC is Treylon Burks from Arkansas. I know it says Arik Gilbert is 25. He's a receiver. Arik Gilbert's a tight end. He wants to play receiver, but he's a tight end. And that's why he's having his differences with Georgia right now. Treylon Burks from Arkansas is the best receiver, and he will be probably a top 20 pick in the NFL draft next year.
Wow. So, and the other interesting thing was the top 2 are both cornerbacks from LSU. So LSU had a down year last year, Treigh. They're expecting both their corners to be really good this year. Are you expecting that as well, or do you think that it's a little too high for them at this point?
Oh no, it's not high at all. There's a reason they call LSU DBU. All they do is produce high level corners. I mean, you got Tyrann Mathieu, Pat Pete. I mean, list goes on and on. I'm trying to think of some other ones, but
Ryan Clark.
Yeah, I mean, they do nothing but produce corners.
And other than that, I'm trying to think of anything else on this list that's intriguing. There's not one quarterback on this list, Treigh. Does that shock you, or do you think that just with the high quarterback turnover that this conference has had with guys going to the NFL in the last couple of years, do you think that they kind of have to establish themselves, and you could probably see a quarterback making it into the top 50 by the end of the year if they play up to snuff and they kind of take that next step in their development?
Yeah, you'll definitely see some at the end of the year, but there's just a lot of turnover coming into this season. But you'll see guys like Alabama's quarterback, Bryce Young. He'll be on that list come into the season. Right now, when you look at returning quarterbacks, probably the best is Matt Corral at Ole Miss. After that, you probably have Connor Bazelak at Missouri, and then Bo Nix at Auburn. So those are some good names, but they're the best of the returners, but none of those guys are elite world beaters that are going to win you a national championship. So no, you don't see any right now, but it's just because of the high amount of turnover right now at that position. You saw Mac Jones just left, and now you're going to have, who was a true freshman last year, be a sophomore this year, Bryce Young starting for Alabama.
And who would you say off this list do you
And
think?
JT Daniels. JT Daniels probably
Right.
could have made this list as a quarterback from Georgia. I forgot about him. But he was hurt last year, so I understand him not being on it.
So who do you think off this list has the best chance at being the highest drafted player from the SEC this year in the 2022 NFL draft? Who would you say is the best NFL prospect that's available?
It's Derek Stingley Jr. If he would have been eligible last year, he would have been a top 10 pick. He's that good. He's one of those freak athletes. He's like a Jalen Ramsey type, where he's going to be a shutdown corner in the NFL for years to come. Outside of that, I think Treylon Burks, a receiver, and then Arik Gilbert, just because of his size. But Arik Gilbert won't be eligible for another year.
Yeah, so he's trying to is he trying to be the next Kyle Pitts there, trying to be a tight end / receiver there? How do you think that's going to play out?
I think so. And what's funny is he was at LSU and just transferred to Georgia, and now he's having problems at Georgia and might be wanting out of there. So don't know what's going on with him. He might be a head case, but he's got talent.
Maybe he goes to Florida, takes over for Kyle Pitts because they seem to let tight ends play wide receiver there. So
Dan Mullen doesn't land big-time recruits anymore.
okay, so Trey, it's time to pick your top 5 teams from the SEC. What are you thinking here as far as who's going to win? Obviously, Alabama's probably the favorite at this point, but give me your rundown from 1 to 5 teams in the SEC.
So I'm going to shock you. Number 1, I'm taking Texas A&M.
Okay. I mean, you liked them in the betting odds, so I mean.
I think Texas A&M gets it done and wins the SEC this year. So I'm going just off of standings. Alabama can't come in second since they would technically be behind A&M, so I'm going Georgia 2, Alabama 3, and then after that I would put LSU at 4 and Kentucky at 5.
Wow, you like Kentucky to finish 5th there.
Yeah, I think they beat Florida too. I think Florida's going to take a big step back this year.
So you have Alabama going from 1st to 3rd, and then you have Florida going from 1st in their division to not even being a top 5 team. So that's but again, when they lose key pieces on their offense, it's kind of hard for you to think that they're going to be able to turn it over, that quick and be that good right out of the gate. I mean, not everybody's Alabama.
No, yeah, you're right.
So Trey's top 5 teams for this year, A&M, he likes them as far as the betting odds and to win the SEC championship. He's got them in their 3rd right now at plus 1,000. He's got Georgia at 2nd, which they're projected. Alabama at 3rd, who's projected 1st. LSU at 4th, who's projected 5th. And then Kentucky at number 5. And they are, I believe, 6th from the bottom. So a little bit of a hot take there, and no love lost between Kentucky and Kentucky and Tennessee. So, Trey's definitely not picking biasly there by wanting to pick Kentucky.
I hate Kentucky, but you got to give them credit. Mark Stoops has done a good job at building that program up and raising the expectations there. So this will be his year. I mean, this is going to be the year he's got to get it done. He's been there for, I think, 8 years now. 8 or 9 years, so he's got to finally show the ability to get over that hump.
So that's basically it for our SEC division or conference preview. Trey, any final words before we wrap up the SEC preview and our college football previews for the 2021 season? Obviously, you got week 0 coming up this weekend. I'm sure you're really excited for that, but just in general, college football being back.
Yeah, man. We are 9 days away from the first official Saturday week 1 game. Tennessee plays on a Thursday next week, so it's 1 week from now when Tennessee is going to be playing. I'm just excited. I'm excited to give people some more betting picks. Now that betting is legal in Tennessee, I can actually put these plays down and then actually follow along with them on my own, betting app on my phone. So I'm excited. I hope everybody else is too.
Yeah, it's been fun doing these conference previews with you guys. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed all 4 parts. If you missed any, they're all on the channel right now for you guys to go and check out. And during this football season, Trey's going to be putting up his picks every single week as long as he's able to for the college football season, what teams he likes and what teams he would think for you guys to bet on out there, since college football and betting in general has really boomed in the last little while. So Trey will be putting that up for you guys on our website, armchairgmsports.com, throughout the college football season, so you're going to want to check out his picks there. As being from the South, he's got a lot more information on college football than we do at this point. So, and he's a I guess, frequent bettor when it comes to sports betting as well. So definitely.
That's one way to put it.
Frequent bettor, maybe not so much frequent winner, but as long as you're right, more times than not, then I think you're doing
I'm right
okay.
more than I'm wrong. I'll give myself that.
Yeah, so stay tuned for those articles throughout the college football season as we kind of transition to more of the hockey coverage on our video side of things. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. And once again, this has been Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater on the Armchair GM Sports Network. As always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputs13_AGM. And as well, make sure you're following my co-host Treigh at Treigh Patterson and checking out his work over at Fox Sports Knoxville on the Blitz as a producer and co-host, as well as a contributing writer for them covering the Tennessee Vols. So please go and check his stuff out over there if you guys are college football junkies like Treigh. A big thank you to all of our great sponsors help put us on Sport the Network, keeping the show on the air, and to you viewers out there and football junkies for tuning in and listening along for this episode. And once again, this is Straight to the Extra Point Alma Mater and our SEC conference preview show right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Enjoy the college football season, guys. We'll see you on the armchairgmsports.com for game picks every single week, and stay tuned for more content on the network. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.